Today I'm going to be installing one of our new Treysta tub and shower valves made by Gerber. First, before I install it, what we have here is a standard shower wall construction. I'm going to be installing it into this wall, but I'd like to point out some of the features of our new valve. The valve comes shipped with the plastic guard in place. For removal, I'm going to just pinch these two plastic tabs on the side and it comes right off, and it just snaps back on again. The stops for both the hot and cold are in the closed position right now. To open, I simply turn a quarter turn. And in the horizontal position for the screwdriver slots, that tells me that these stops are open at this time. I'm going to reclose them. Next, I'd like to point out that inside the bonnet we have something we call the pressure test cap. This is so that the plumber or the installer can test both his hot and cold water lines to make sure there are no leaks. Let me show you some of the features of the cap. First, I'll remove the bonnet. What you can see facing you is a boss, what we call a boss. This allows you to install it into either the cold side or the hot side and test one line at a time. Or if you want, with the cavity facing inward and replacing the bonnet to make sure that it doesn't pop out again under pressure, you can test both lines at the same time. This particular valve in our Treysta series features the cold compression type PEX connection for both the hot and cold sides, and they're also, if you'll notice, they're in the vertical position. The advantages of the vertical position inputs are that you can mount the valve close to a stud behind your wall, and you can also, if your supply lines are coming from top down, you can avoid using elbows, which is a time saver and a money saver for the plumber. And here's an example of a cold water or cold compression PEX hose coming down and making the connection. Right now I'm going to install it with supply lines coming from bottom out. With the valve in place, I'm able to reinstall my plastic guard. Right now, the plastic guard is flush with the finished wall, but there is some variation in depth that is allowed with this valve, and with all our valves on the Treysta series. For maximum depth of install, like say a little bit more inside the finished wall, you're allowed to go 3 5/8 for max depth and minimum 3 1/8 to the finished wall surface. That would have the plastic guard sticking out a little bit. And you're still able to attach your trim because of that variation. Let me now show you how to use the pressure test cap. I'm removing the bonnet. Let's say I tested both lines, but I want to test each individual line. There's a small boss here, what we call a boss on the end of the cap. This is used for testing either the hot side or the cold side in the valve. Right now, I'm going to use the boss to plug the cold side so I can test my hot side. That being seated in, I can replace the bonnet, and I'm ready to turn on the pressure. And that would be the pressure test for one side. To test both sides, I simply flip the cap around and the cavity side goes inward, replace the bonnet, and I can test both sides at the same time. Right now I'd like to insert our cartridge. Now that I've pressure tested, notice that the cartridge has the word up printed on the side of the cartridge. This helps you get the right orientation on the pins, which are located on the base of the cartridge on the back side, so that those pins go into the 2 pinholes in the brass valve. I'm not able to turn it, and that tells me the pins have seated into the brass holes. Now I'm ready to install the bonnet. I'd like to point out one other feature of our cartridge. For back-to-back installations, where you have a valve facing another bathroom facing away, back-to-back with this bathroom, for example, you may want to, since your cold water line comes up for both bathrooms and your hot water line, you may want to reverse the cold and the hot entrances to the valve. To do that, it's simply a matter of turning the stem 180 degrees. Keeping in mind there's a small dimple on the top of the stem here, which in standard installations is always facing upward. Just remove the temperature limiter. I simply turn the stem 180 degrees so the dimple is facing down and reinstall the temperature limiter. Like so. So now the cartridge is prepared for hot water supply on the right side and cold water on the left, just the opposite of standard. What you see here on our shower installation is the Treysta valve mounted for supply lines coming down from the top. Vertical inputs again, same valve as we had before. And the versatility of vertical inputs, of course, is being able to connect from supplies coming from below or above. With it mounted 180 degrees in reverse, however, there is a small arrow on my retention ring which is now pointed downward. Please notice that we need to reverse the retention ring so that it's with the arrow upward again. Because right now, when I put on my plaster guard, there is an up arrow and the word up right here, and I'm not able to put on the plaster guard right now with the valve mounted upside down. So putting the plaster guard on, both arrows are facing down. For this step, all I need to do is unscrew 2 screws which are holding slotted slots on the retention ring. I won't have to remove the screws. Just simply loosen the screws, turn the retention ring 180 degrees, and put the little slots back behind the screw heads again. Tighten them up. Now, as you can see, the arrow for the retention ring is on top. I'm able to have the plaster guard with its arrow upward also on top and reinstall it onto the valve. Now that the cartridge is installed and I've tightened the bonnet, I'm going to open the stops. Quarter turn on both sides. And we have pressure to the cartridge. I've installed the cap. Now I'm ready to install the rest of the trim. Here I have the, from the Parma collection, the escutcheon plate made by Dance with 2 screw holes for attachment. I thread my screws in first, and I have guide holes here on the plaster guard to help me get the screws in. Next goes my trim ring. And finally the handle. And that completes our installation of the Treysta valve made by Gerber and also our dance trim collection. I hope this helps you in your installation of the same products. And if you have any further questions, please go to gerberonline.com. Thank you.